Hello and welcome to Shining a Light, the series where I showcase great games that you may not have heard of. Whenever an undeveloped video game successfully seeks out crowdfunding, it usually ends up falling into one of three categories. The first category is an outright scam. These are what happen when the developer comes up with a neat concept, puts together a great pitch video, and never really intends to deliver on their goals. Instead, they'll just pocket the money and either release nothing or simply release a woefully underdeveloped product that can barely even be called a game. The second category is a failure. These are the result of a passionate team who either lack the experience and talent necessary to create a good game, or are too ambitious for their own good, leaving them completely unable to make good on their promises. This type of game is the result of incompetence rather than outright malice, but even so, you'll still get a crappy or non-existent game. The third category is a passion project made by an individual or group who had an idea and wanted to make it a reality. These types of people have the drive and the know-how to make a unique game. Some of my favorite games, like Hand of Fate and Darkest Dungeon, fall into this category. When the right people are able to develop a different type of game without having to submit themselves to corporations who have no idea what gamers want, something amazing can be made. And I'm happy to say that today I'll be shining a light on a game that I believe falls into that third category. Sunrider, Mask of Arcadius. This game was a massive Kickstarter success, netting over $44,000 from an initial $3,000 goal. And let me tell you, for a relatively inexperienced and small dev team, they really managed to pull off something that's a ton of fun. So before I continue, technically this game is two games combined into one, Sunrider First Arrival and Sunrider Mask of Arcadius. But in the Steam store, it's labeled as Sunrider Mask of Arcadius, so that's how I'm going to be referring to it from here on out, okay? Sunrider Mask of Arcadius is a tactical turn-based strategy game where you command a fleet of mechs to fight an army of space communists hell-bent on universal domination. No, I'm not kidding. It's available on PC, Mac, and Linux for free. Yes, it's free, and there are no subscriptions, microtransactions, or anything else to deal with. It's just free. The story is presented in the style of a visual novel, meaning it's largely dialogue-driven and is from the first-person perspective of the main character. Speaking of which, you play as Captain Cato Shields of the planet Sierra Space Force. You are on board the only military ship able to escape after the aforementioned space communists, a group known as Pact, led by the mysterious masked figure known only as Arcadius, completely dominated the Syrian military force, taking control of the planet with almost no interference. Vowing vengeance, you leave to bolster your ranks and build up a fleet to fight back against Pact. When not engaging in a story section, you'll be faced with a hex-based grid arena where you'll engage with turn-based combat with either enemy pirates or Pact forces. Typically, your win condition will be to simply destroy all enemy units, and if your flagship, the Sunrider, is destroyed, it's game over. Sometimes there will be different goals, such as getting the Sunrider safely to the far right side of the grid, and sometimes there will be other ways to lose the game, such as if you're tasked with protecting a civilian vessel, the destruction of that ship will be a loss. However, the vast majority of levels will have the objective of destroy the enemies without the Sunrider going down. Before I get into too much more detail about the gameplay, there is something I really need to mention, and if you played any amount of this game, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This game is really freaking hard. I cannot overstate this. You might jokingly ask, is this the Dark Souls of turn-based strategy? No. Dark Souls has absolutely nothing on Sunrider in terms of difficulty. There are 6 difficulty modes. Visual novel mode is meant to be for people who just want the story, so the numbers are tuned to the point where it's very difficult to fail. Then there's casual mode, which is meant for players who aren't really good at tactical games. The difficulty setting is still a bit of a challenge, but it's definitely manageable. The next difficulty level is Ensign. This is the level I'd suggest most people start out with, even though it's still below the developer's intended difficulty. Oh, don't worry, it'll still be frustrating, you'll still lose a bunch, and you'll still want to break your monitor by the end of it. Then there's the intended difficulty level of Captain. It's very, very hard, and the description even tells you that it's very unforgiving. You'll need to have a pretty solid understanding of how the game works if you want to attempt this difficulty level. And then there's the hard difficulty. That's one hell of an understatement if I've ever heard it. I can't beat this game mode. I've tried, and I just can't do it. You get overwhelmed too quickly, and I don't understand the game well enough to beat it at this level. And then there's the Space Whale difficulty. I'm just going to read out the description from the game and let it speak for itself. Space Whale, a legendary difficulty mode, not really ever tested by the dev team. Beware, possibility of winning is not confirmed. Yeah, how nutty is that? From what I hear, a few people have managed to beat the game on Space Whale, but don't count on ever being able to do it yourself. So what I'm trying to get at is that the game is hard. If you're looking for a challenge or something that you can take the time to master, this game is absolutely for you. So let's get into a little more about how the game actually functions. I'm not the biggest tactical gamer, but from what I can tell, a lot of the systems used in this game are not widely used in other tactical games. There are 4 main types of weaponry that units can use. There's energy, kinetics, missiles, and melee. Note that not all units can use all types of weaponry. The cool thing is that each type of weapon has its own unique strengths and weaknesses. Energy weapons typically do well at taking out isolated enemies and attacking at a distance, but are mitigated by shields and armor and do comparatively low base damage. Kinetics are good for dealing lots of damage and shredding armor, but have low range, and using flak weapons, which is a type of kinetic weapon that is basically a machine gun, will tear through an unarmored target, but any armor the target does have will be doubly effective. Missiles are great long-range damage dealers, but can be shot down by flak weapons, and you only have a limited supply. Then melee weapons should be fairly obvious. They do a bunch of damage, but you have to be right up next to the enemy, which is not exactly the safest proposition. Though there are some issues with how the 4 weapon types are balanced around the overall flow of the game, I really like what the developers were going for. But what I really like, and what I think is more impressive, is how defense works. As Sunrider is a turn-based game, all the action, the attacking, the damage, and the deaths will happen on a single turn, so you may be wondering what exactly I mean by defense. Well, earlier I briefly mentioned how shields mitigate energy weapons and flak can shoot down missiles. The way it works is that each unit that can use one or both of these defense systems is given a radius for each of them. In the case of shields, any unit within the shield radius is given protection from energy weapons. For flak, every time a missile enters a unit's flak radius, it has a chance to be shot down. What's really cool about this system is that multiple shields and flak will stack on top of each other, meaning that your units, and the enemy units, are able to provide collective defense boosts. It's sort of a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. This makes your positioning actually matter in a grid-based 2D strategy game that doesn't really have any environmental modifiers. Okay, there is one stage that does, but that's the exception, not the rule. Without a defense system like this, which partially dictates the flow of the game, Sunrider would be incredibly one-dimensional, and a large portion of the strategy would become irrelevant. I think it's this that drew me into the game after dipping my toes a bit. This is what sets the game apart in my eyes. So now let's talk about the story a bit. Sunrider is a very story-heavy game, which makes sense since the developers originally marketed the game as part tactical RPG and part visual novel. As the artwork suggests, Sunrider features a cast of characters. Normally I find that having a large cast of significant characters makes it difficult to identify with some or all of them. There's simply too much going on to really develop any of them. However, and I don't know if it's because of the individual writers or it's something about the medium itself, I find that visual novels tend to do a very good job at creating incredibly human characters that the reader can really grow attached to. Sunrider is no exception to this, and I found that each character was someone I found myself caring about, and I really liked how each of their personalities played off one another and how none of them ever really felt out of place. Speaking of their personalities, in typical visual novel fashion, every one of the characters, except for the protagonist, is somewhat caricatured. Their personalities are exaggerated a bit to the point of being kind of unrealistic. However, this is a game where you command a fleet of mechs to go kill pirates and space communists, so it's not exactly out of place. I'm gonna leave it right there so I don't delve into potential spoilers, so let's move on, shall we? Next up, the art. If you've watched other installments of Shining a Light, you'll know that I generally don't have much to say about the art in games as it's very subjective. That holds true here as well. I like it, it's a nice crisp art style that doesn't really exaggerate features at all. The only way it really strays in that regard is the fact that they gave each significant character a different hair color, so there are a few oddities such as the white hair that's become kind of a staple in visual novels, this purple hair, and this other purple hair. But I get what they were going for, and it's not extreme enough to take away from the intended effect. And yes, I will bring up the question that I'm sure some of you are asking. There is an 18+ patch, but it's not really anything intense. There are a few scenes with nudity, but no actual sex. It's done in a manner that makes sense in the context of the story and is both tasteful and mature. I almost always recommend playing games as the developers intended them to be played, so I'll say you should play the uncensored version, but realistically there's not going to be much of a difference either way. Now I should briefly mention the voice acting. The game does not have voiced dialogue. What it does have are battle lines. Basically, when you select a unit, your unit does something, or something affects your unit, they'll yell out one of several different voice lines. They're kinda nice, and they bring some life to the battlefield. More importantly, they really allow you to associate the individual characters with their mechs, and they put a voice to the important characters, which I find very important from an immersion perspective. I'll quickly play a few lines just so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Awaiting orders, sir! Commencing bombardment! The enemy has evaded my attack!
Captain. Unleashing. Target successful.
Sections 32, 16, and 2 have been compromised.
And now, the music. Oh my god, this music. This is easily one of my favorite game soundtracks of all time. And may I add, this soundtrack is included in the game files, no purchase necessary. The soundtrack mostly consists of these really intense orchestral pieces that feel exactly right for a large-scale space battle. There's a few pieces that are a little more upbeat and lighthearted. They play during story sections, and while they're good, they pale in comparison to the battle songs, which are quite frankly epic. I'll play you a little bit of a few of my favorite songs from the soundtrack. The song titles will be on screen, as well as a timestamp if you're crazy enough to want to skip it. And before I conclude, let me quickly go over some of the problems I have with the game. After all, no game is perfect. Now, Love and Space were rookie developers at the time of creating Sunrider, and if we're being completely honest, it shows. The game was clearly built on a visual novel engine, and the general layout of the battlefield tends to seem a bit cluttered. Also, the actual combat feels kinda clunky. I found myself misclicking on units throughout my playthrough, and sometimes the inputs just don't feel very responsive. It's not fun to have to fight with the game just to play it. Also, whenever you fire upon an enemy, or vice versa, it cuts to a CG image, plays an animation on top of it, and then cuts back. While the images are pretty cool, it really interrupts the flow of gameplay to just cut away from the battlefield like that, and to be honest, after seeing each picture literally hundreds of times, it gets old. The upgrade system is also kinda confusing, and it feels simultaneously necessary in a game like this, but also just tacked on. The numbers don't really all make sense, and to this day I have no idea how the curve in upgrade cost is calculated or how they determine the stat values for each upgrade. The black market items you can purchase are kinda neat, but mostly underwhelming, especially when you really want to be keeping your units upgraded. Also, you can't really experiment all that often since you only get partial refunds for downgrading. This is a big problem considering how hard the game is. There were several instances where I had to restart my game from the beginning due to inefficient upgrading. And in regards to the gameplay itself, I feel like the best strategy of keeping your units in a rigid clump impedes on the gameplay, and it amusingly turns the assassin character into an evasion tank rather than a damage dealer. The defense system is really neat, but combined with the game's unforgiving nature, it forces you into playing the meta and stifles any significant innovation. Furthermore, there isn't a lot of mission diversity. By that I mean most of the missions simply tell you to blow everything else up. They don't really play out any differently from one another. Even the big climactic boss battle still entails you picking off the normal enemies and then chipping away at the big baddie. While very fun, the gameplay did tend to get a bit samey. There are definitely problems with the game. Problems I wouldn't necessarily accept from an experienced dev team. But considering the game is available for the low price of free, I can't complain too much. What I will say is that many of the problems I have with Sunrider Mask of Arcadius are actually addressed in the sequel, Sunrider Liberation Day. The battle effects are incorporated into the grid, so no more cutting away. Upgrades are more customizable. There are varied missions that make me wildly change up my strategy. And they also added just a bunch of little things that made the game better. For example, as I mentioned, the defense system in Mask of Arcadius basically relegates the assassin character to being an evasion tank. She absolutely will not survive the next turn if she breaks formation. However, in Liberation Day, there's an upgrade that gives her an ability to cloak herself for the next turn, and as a result, she'll be untargetable by enemies. This lets her actually go out and slice up enemies, which fits her design much better than in Mask of Arcadius. But of course, this video is about Mask of Arcadius and not Liberation Day, which you actually have to pay for. But I thought it would be prudent to mention. So in conclusion, Sunrider Mask of Arcadius is free and it's absolutely badass. This game will run on a potato, so you have absolutely no excuse to not try it out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. Ew, I am never saying that again. But yeah, likes, comments, subscriptions, and follows on my other social media are always appreciated. I'm really hyped to be making videos again, and I'm already itching to get started on the next one. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Can you make my